This podcast was recorded on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation.
Hello and welcome to The Real Story with Joe Hildebrand. That's me. Story checks out. And every week we pull apart the main yarns that are getting Australia all hot under the collar. And this week it's that old doozy, the penny that keeps coming back. Is Australia a racist country? A big warm shout out to Laura Tingle. We are going to get right into it, right in among the weeds of what it was that the ABC's chief political correspondent said at the Sydney Writers' Festival, where it came from, what was the point of it, and is it true? We're also going to find out what is Direction 99, which has surely got to be the most ominous government order since, well, you know the one I mean.
Execute Order 66.
Also, did you know we have just been formally endorsed by Media Watch? Well, kind of. We'll get to that too. Let's talk about the Immigration Minister, Andrew Giles, if indeed he is still the Immigration Minister by the time you hear this. Andrew Giles, as everybody knows, has had an absolutely stellar first term as a Minister of the Crown. He has been in the newspapers almost constantly, which as a minister is usually a great thing if you're doing your job and getting stuff done. But in his case, is all about the stuff that he's not getting done, including, of course, the release of dozens and dozens of criminal detainees who got out of detention due to a High Court order that the judge of the High Court actually flagged was most likely going to happen. It then turned out that Andrew Giles and the government didn't actually have a plan for that happening, despite them being told, this is going to happen, right? You guys are ready for this? And in the 6 months since that has happened, and they have done nothing about it, they have done nothing about it to stop it from happening again, to the point where many of the people released have allegedly or otherwise reoffended. And it now appears that a direction that Andrew Giles gave in the first part of last year is being used by the Administrative Appeals Tribunal to keep other criminals in Australia, even after they have committed the most heinous crimes. I'm talking about rape, killing, domestic violence. They are being released because of something called Direction 99.
This was a visa that was cancelled and remained cancelled by my department in line with Ministerial Direction 99, under Ministerial Direction 99, Ministerial Direction 99. Direction 99, Direction 99. Direction 99, Ministerial Direction 99. Direction 99, in line with Ministerial Direction 99.
So that was Andrew Giles in Question Time, defending himself over case after case of foreign criminals who couldn't be deported because of Direction 99. And again, this is the direction that he invented that made it harder for criminals to be deported if they had strong ties to Australia. So even when the minister himself tries to deport them, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal overturns the minister's decision based on the minister's own direction. Are you keeping up? But why call something Direction 99 in the first place? Direction 99 does sound very sinister. In fact, it sounds kind of familiar.
The time has come. Execute Order 66.
But I digress. The point is, Direction 99 was something come up with by Immigration Minister Andrew Giles before the detainee debacle that said before you deported someone from Australia, you had to take into account and clearly give some kind of emphasis to their ties to the community, whether or not they had family ties or career ties, job ties, community ties. And this has then been used by the Administrative Appeals Tribunal to keep people who have done horrendous things, bashed people, raped people, killed people, but he's got strong ties to the community, so we're going to let him stay. Even leaving all that aside, the Minister for Immigration, Andrew Giles, has managed to come up with a direction that makes it easier for the Administrative Appeals Tribunal to overturn his own decisions. Another great little yarn I came across this week was in the Daily Mail, which accused our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, of being out of touch with ordinary people doing it tough. And this is because apparently earlier in the week, he went out for lunch with Justin Hemmies and they had lobster. And then later in the week, on Friday, Anthony Albanese addressed the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue where he dared to say, shock horror, he understood that Australians were doing it tough.
I understand that Australians are doing it tough right now, and I certainly haven't forgotten what it's like to struggle and to strive, to worry about your family's economic security, to wonder if you'll get the opportunity to pursue your aspirations. That's my life story and the life story of so many people here in Western Sydney.
Now, I love the Daily Mail. It was a great little gotcha. PM eating lobster is almost as good as PM spending $500 million on private jets, and we'll get to that later. But the point is that the PM actually does, unlike most PMs, know what it's like to do it tough. We all know he grew up in a public housing flat with a single mum. He was the only child, and they did do it tough. And so what is actually wrong with him saying that he knows what it's like to do it tough when he has done it tough and he knows what it's like? Well, apparently it's a big surprise to a lot of people that our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, isn't living in a council flat in Camperdown anymore. He's the Prime Minister. And yes, he gets paid a fair whack of money, probably more than you or I, definitely more than I. And he got a couple of nice houses too. One in Canberra, which unfortunately the downside is you have to live in Canberra. Another pretty good one on the harbour in Sydney. Been there a couple of times. It's awesome. They always ask me to leave. Still, Albo's the Prime Minister. Yes, he's going to go out with rich people. Yes, he's going to have fancy lunches. Yes, he still knows what it's like to do it tough. And I know what it's like to do it tough as well because I grew up poor. I grew up with a single mum as well, who had to raise 3 kids on her own, one of them who was special needs. Not me, I have to keep clarifying. The point being, you can actually get out of those situations, and that's a good thing. So I just don't understand this whole thing where we expect our Prime Minister to support aspirational voters and support people making a better future for their children than they had. That's the great Australian dream. That's the great migrant dream. That's the great working class dream. And yet when you've got someone who was probably born poorer than any Prime Minister we've ever had, who then goes on to actually become Prime Minister, who goes from public housing to the lodge, we say, oh, see, he doesn't know. Look, he's out of touch. He's elitist and out of touch. At least he was in touch once. That's something. Something pretty new. And again, as Neville Rand said, the whole point of the working class is you want to get out. You don't want to say to people, hey, come on down, the weather's fine. You want to say, no, we're gonna get out and we're going to help you get out. We're going to make it easier for you to join the middle class. It's a beautiful thing in Australia called aspiration, a wonderful, wonderful thing. And maybe, just maybe, if you get it, you can get your own set of Boeing 737s. That's right. It turns out you can't even buy yourself a couple of Boeing 737s these days without the media jumping down your throat. And that is exactly what Albo found out when it turned out that the government had purchased 2 Boeing 737s for official use by the Prime Minister, the Governor-General, the ministers, all for a whopping $450 million. But you know what? I reckon that's a bit of a bargain because it turns out that A, these planes were ordered not by the current Albanese Labor government, but by the previous Morrison Liberal government. And also, they are getting them for an absolute steal. I always say you got to spend money to make money in this game. The previous government was actually going to lease 2 aircraft for $550 million for 12 years. And then this government comes in and finds out it's cheaper to buy them for $450 million and have them until the end of time, or indeed till they just rust apart on the runway. And you know what? That's the sort of bargain that my mum would be proud of. Our family motto was never pay full retail, although she did shoplift batteries. And this is the point that so many people seem to either miss or willfully ignore about this story. The government is actually saving money. Unless you want the PM to wander around on an electric scooter, dressed in a hair shirt, begging for scraps, he's going to need a plane. And so he might as well get the best value for money plane that the government can get. And that is what I tried to say on Sky News. But did anyone notice? No, except for my old friend Paul Barry on Media Watch.
As the Australian noted, but almost no one else did, buying the planes had actually reduced the bill for taxpayers because the cost of leasing them had blown out.
Due to foreign exchange movements and was due to hit $550 million, prompting a decision to buy the jets outright.
A point that Joe Hildebrand, who did read the article, was trying in vain to make on Sky.
So it was actually cheaper to buy these two jets. The government actually saved $100 million and actually got the jets.
Luxury jets. Luxury jets.
Yes, that's right. Media Watch just real storied the real story. Set your watches, ladies and gentlemen, because yet another highfalutin type has accused Australia of being racist. This time it was, of course, Laura Tingle, who is the august chief political correspondent for the august 7:30 program on the august Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And she told the Sydney Writers' Festival a few days ago her thoughts on Peter Dutton's budget reply. Have a listen.
For a major political leader to be saying, everything that's going wrong in this country is because of migrants. And, I had this sudden flash of people turning up to try to rent a property or at an auction, and if they look a bit different, whatever you define different as, that basically he has given them licence to be abused. I mean, we are a racist country, let's face it, we always have been, and it's very depressing, but to give licence like that, I find profoundly depressing.
So there you have it. By listening to Peter Dutton's budget reply and then imagining a racist scenario in her head, Laura Tingle has decided that Australia is and always has been a racist country. But which Australia does she mean? Was it the people in the room with her? I mean, I know the Sydney Writers' Festival is wider than a polar bear in a snowstorm, but that's no way to speak to your crowd, Laura. Come on. Was it the panel itself? From what I could gather, it was 4 people, one of whom identified as Indigenous, and the other 3 of whom were, well, I don't know how to put this, white. That seems to me a pretty blancmange representation of a multicultural country that has a huge percentage of its population born or descended from those born overseas. Or maybe it was just the people out of the room, those others. Well, Laura Tingle didn't really say. She just said it as though it was a fact. Like you would say the sky is blue. You don't have to provide any supporting evidence. You don't have to provide any examples. Everyone knows the sky is blue, and according to a dear friend of mine who was in the audience there, everyone knew Australia was racist. No further correspondence needed to be entered into. So let's take it as read. Let's just take Laura Tingle's assessment of Australia as a racist country as gospel. Let's just accept it. Well, do you know what another racist country is? All of them. Yes, every single country in the whole wide world throughout all of human history has been pretty racist at one time or another. So why is there a fixation with Australian racism in the year 2024? Well, one reason might be that we had a little vote last year. I'm not sure if you noticed it. Most people had bigger things on their mind. But it was whether or not to recognise Indigenous people in the Constitution and give them a voice to Parliament. Now, I was a very, very strong supporter of this referendum campaign. I was a very strong yes supporter, and I watched with horror as the people who were supposedly in charge of it just tore it apart limb from limb and just stomped on its bones. It was just the worst campaign I've ever seen in all my life. But anyway, I'm over it now. I'm getting therapy. Everything's okay. But we did get a window into how people think of voters, especially those at the top of the tree, in that campaign, because very soon we had people accusing anyone who was voting no or the no campaign itself of being racist. And this included infamously, I'm very, very sorry to say, Marsha Langton. Have a listen to one of her quotes.
Both Conservative leaders, the Liberal Party opposition leader Peter Dutton and the National Party leader David Littleproud, have committed their parties to advocating a hard no case for the question. Moreover, their arguments are specious and increasingly absurd, appealing to their racist base with claims that the proposal will racially divide the nation.
So there you have it yet again, evil Peter Dutton being a racist and appealing to his evil, racist, Liberal coalition voter base. And that's why the Voice referendum failed. It wasn't because the campaign was the most dysfunctional and incompetent campaign that anyone with any political experience has seen in recent memory. Oh, no, it's because everybody's racist. And all these racists, they just seem to appear in the middle of the campaign. Because, of course, before the campaign started, about 60-40% of Australians were for versus against the Voice to Parliament. Yeah, 60% of Australians thought it was a great idea. Then the campaign started, and suddenly 60% of Australians thought it was a terrible idea. That means 20% of Australians just suddenly became racist after the campaign began. Where did these racists come from? Well, we have the results of the referendum debate, and we can go through it electorate by electorate. And guess what? They're not Dutton voters. The people who voted against it, yeah, there were plenty of Dutton voters who voted against it. There were plenty of coalition voters who voted against it. But the biggest areas that opposed the Voice to Parliament were not those in the leafy, elite suburbs of Sydney and Melbourne. They weren't those who went to the Sydney Writers' Festival, for example. So maybe they're right. Maybe rich, educated white people really aren't racists. Maybe they can all give themselves a little round of applause, as I'm sure they did at the end of Tingle's panel session just a few days ago. No, in the electorate of Macarthur, 65.1% of voters, almost 2/3, voted no. Or perhaps they're in McMahon, Chris Bowen's seat, where 65.9% of voters, almost 2/3, voted no. Doesn't look like a Liberal seat to me. I'm pretty sure it would come as a surprise to Chris Bowen if it was a Liberal seat, because he's the sitting MP. Penrith, 69% vote no. And on it goes throughout Western and Southwestern Sydney. Blaxland, held by Jason Clare, great bloke. Great Labor bloke. Definitely not a Liberal. 61.7% of the voters in his electorate voted no. And it goes on and on. Banks, 61.1% vote no. That is in Western and Southwestern Sydney, the most multicultural and ethnically diverse electorates in the country. And they are all voting no, in many cases by a factor of 2-1. So that is this vast referendum in which the claim of racism was yet again thrown around like confetti. And who did all these supposed so-called racists turn out to be? Migrants. And on that note, it's time for me to leave you. Thanks so much for listening. If you love what you hear, leave a rating and review. If you hate what you hear, just send us an email, therealstory@novapodcast.com.au, or you can drop me a DM on Instagram. My handle is @Joe_Hildebrand, and I'll chat to you next week. Take care.